Today we are going to discuss about the arboviruses. What are the arboviruses? The arboviruses are a group of viruses that maintain themselves in nature by a biological mode of transmission. And this word is very important and a key word in understanding the arboviruses, biological mode of transmission. They are transmitted from one vertebrate host to another vertebrate host through or by blood suckling arthropods, which will be to transmit the arboviruses, will be infected with arboviruses and have a lifelong infection without evidence of disease or damage to themselves. So this means that the arthropods have the arboviruses replicating in their bodies for lifelong. As long as they live, they will have the infection inside their bodies and without showing a disease and without causing a damage for the body of the arthropod. That's why they will be able to keep those arboviruses in nature. So if they die, the arboviruses will not be able to replicate and to spread in the nature. But if they will keep healthy and good and doing whatever they have to do in life, so they will keep spreading those arboviruses. So the arthropods, these insects that suck blood from any mammal or vertebrate host, they will spread in between those vertebrate hosts, they will spread the arboviruses. So to have an arbovirus in any place to spread in any area, so we have to have existing in this area a triad, and this triad will help to maintain the cycle of life of these arboviruses and will maintain themselves in the nature or in this area where this infection or these diseases caused by the arboviruses will exist. The triad is number one, the vertebrate host, for example, all mammals, birds, snakes, of course, humans, maybe apes, monkeys, whatever vertebrate host. The second item is the hematophagus arthropod, for example, like the mosquito, the ticks, the sandfly, whatever insect that can suck blood is considered to be a hematophagus arthropod. And the third item is the virus. So any place in this world where we can find a vertebrate host with existing around a good number of hematophagus arthropods, and whenever the virus is included in the nature where this vertebrate host and the arthropod are both living, so this arbovirus will start its cycle of life. We have to understand how the arthropod or the insect that suck blood will spread this arbovirus. The arthropod will do its function as a spreader of this virus through the biological way of transmission. This is completely different from how, for example, flies spread the bacteria. They only spread it or move it from one place to another mechanically. They only attach to their body, and the flies will take the bacteria from here and put it there. But in case of arboviral infections, The way is completely different. Why? I'm not writing here all the text it's present in the book, but I will only explain shortly the meaning of biological transmission. Biological transmission means the arthropod is gonna suck the blood of a vertebrate. If this vertebrate is sick, having the disease caused by whatever arbovirus, so this arthropod will eat some blood with mixed with a virus, that is the arbovirus. This arbovirus is going to replicate in the gut, in the stomach, in the GIT of this arthropod. And then, after replicating in this gut, the virus will cause a viremia for this arthropod. The virus will spread all over the parts of the arthropod, the insect, and as part of this viremia, the virus will spread everywhere in the organs of this arthropod, including the salivary glands of the arthropod. So, whenever this arthropod is going to bite or suck the blood of another vertebrate, this time this vertebrate can be a healthy one, healthy human, healthy horse, healthy monkey, healthy whatever. So when he is going to suck the blood just for eating, he will contaminate this tiny small wound caused by this arthropod with the saliva produced from the salivary gland of this insect, and it will contaminate the wound on the skin of this vertebrate. So the virus will get in contact with the serum or the blood of this new host, where it's going to replicate and cause infection for this host. So what we mean by this biological transmission is that the virus is going to enter the arthropod, multiply in the arthropod, be produced in the salivary gland of the arthropod, and then contaminate the blood of another vertebrate whenever this insect is going to bite another host. Of course, there is thousands and thousands of examples of arboviral infections. We have selected for you some important ones that are really near of us. Not all of these selected examples are existing in our country, but maybe they are famous or they are present in near areas for us. You should know that sometimes or many times the arthropod can transmit the virus to a host. Still, this host cannot present any disease, so the infection in many persons or hosts can be silent or subclinical, so the infected person will not experience any disease. Or if this host, this human, if he experiences a disease, the disease can exist in one of three forms. First, it can be just a mild febrile illness. This means fever but not much high, with or without a skin rash and polyarthritis. The meaning of polyarthritis is pain in the joints, many joints, pain in many joints associated with rash spots on the skin. Okay, this is the first form of the disease. The second form is a severe and often fatal encephalitis. Encephalitis means inflammation of the brain tissue. Sometimes some people, when they go to have some tourism in the Far East, or go to the jungles, or go to forests, sometimes when they come back, after they come back by 2 weeks or a month, sometimes they experience a meningitis like symptoms, and they go to the hospital, and they will be diagnosed as a meningitis or inflammation in the brain tissues of unexplained cause. Most probably the cause would be an arboviral infection caused by an insect. The third form is hemorrhagic fever. Hemorrhagic fever means that there is a fever associated with hemorrhage. The fever in case of arboviral infection is very characteristic by having biphasic course. They have a saddleback type of fever. This means there is a fever and then a period where there is no fever, remission, no fever, normal temperature, and then the fever will come back, and then the patient can undergo convalescence. So usually the fever is of 2 peaks. Here we will explain why the fever in case of arboviral infection will be of 2 peaks. First, after the bite and injection of the virus into the blood or the body of the new host, there will be a local replication of the viral at the site of the bite. And then an initial viremia will start with a mild fever. And after this initial viremia, a remission, this means no symptoms, no fever, no disease, no fatigue, remission for few days. The person who has been experiencing this fever will cure from this fever for few days, and then he will experience a secondary viremia, second time, a viremia for the second time. And this second time of viremia, this recrudescence means it will come for the second time. Recrudescence of this pyrexia, this fever, is associated by the manifestation of the infection. This virus will express his way of producing the disease. Either he will produce an encephalitis if the virus will be localized in the brain, or if it will be localized in the tissues, he will be in the form of specific fever. Specific fever means there will be maybe rash, maybe polyarthritis, maybe hemorrhage. This is the specific fevers. First selected example for arboviral infections is the yellow fever. The yellow fever is a very famous fever in Africa, and this fever is an acute febrile illness caused by mosquito. So it is a mosquito-borne illness in the form of acute fever. The severe cases will experience jaundice. This means that there is high bilirubin and yellow discoloration of the skin and the eye. Proteinuria, loss of all the proteins of the body in the urine, and this is a serious condition. And hemorrhage. Hemorrhage means bleeding everywhere, mainly in the gastrointestinal tract. He will bleed from the stool will show digested blood, maybe he can vomit blood, and there will be a hemorrhage due to lack of liver produced clotting factor secondary to liver necrosis. So this virus will attack the liver, it will cause a serious form of hepatitis, it will cause necrosis of many cells of the liver, so the liver will be so diseased in an acute form, and this will cause hemorrhage in the body because the liver is the main site where the clotting factors are prepared. See here in this picture the areas where the yellow fever is endemic. Usually it is endemic in the places where there is jungles and there is moisture and there is damp, so there is many mosquitoes and insects that feed on blood, and this is usually around the areas where there is rainy forests, so they are usually around the equator. So for preventing the yellow fever, there is a vector control. Wherever it is endemic or the areas that receive people coming from areas where this yellow fever is endemic, there must be a mosquito abatement and a mosquito control, especially in the aeroplanes. So the aeroplanes plan to come or to go to these areas take very high care not to transfer mosquitoes from these areas to other countries, just to not spread the yellow fever from these places to another places. Also, there is a vaccine available. You can vaccinate all persons that are susceptible to yellow fever, and this vaccine is very important, but it must be taken at least 10 days before arrival in or from an endemic zone, and this vaccine is an attenuated form of this virus by serial passage in tissue culture cells, and this strain is called 17D strain. As I said, the 17D strain is a live attenuated vaccine. You must take very good care about this information, and it is prepared by serial passage of the virus through tissue culture cell lines. The vaccine is given in a single dose. It gives a very good antibody response. It must be taken 10 days before traveling to the area, endemic area for yellow fever, and this protection will persist for 10 years. So if you go after these 10 years, you must take a booster dose of this vaccine. Second example is the dengue fever, and it is called also the breakbone fever. And as you see in this chart, also it is present in the rainy forests and the areas around the equator. The dengue fever is characterized by fever with rash, muscle and joint pain, and it is usually transmitted by the arthropod, which is Aedes aegypti mosquito. According to WHO, the incidence is increased last decades, and there has been 2 outbreaks in Egypt, one in 2015 and one in 2017. Another disease, which is the West Nile fever, it usually occurs in the Middle East, in subtropical area, Africa and Southwest Asia. It is named after the Nile. Actually, the clinical illness of the West Nile fever is a very mild disease, mild acute febrile illness. Sometimes there is lymphadenopathy, which is enlargement in the lymph nodes, and rash associated with this illness. So sometimes the patient can experience asymptomatic disease or subclinical infection, or he cannot notice that this febrile illness is characterized by this lymphadenopathy. He can miss these 2 characteristics cannot be noticed by the patient, so he will consider this illness as any other flu. So usually in the endemic areas and here in Egypt, the illness is mild. But this illness has been transmitted to USA in a period of time. But when this illness happened in the USA, when this virus existed in another area of the world, it didn't cause that mild disease. On the contrary, it caused a muscle weakness and flaccid paralysis in addition to encephalitis. And also there were some deaths caused by this West Nile fever. So the disease in the Western Hemisphere was a serious one. You can see here in this photo that how this virus had spread from the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere, from the Nile or from the Middle East to the USA. You can see here that the migrating birds, they migrated from the Eastern Hemisphere to the Western Hemisphere, had went there and then have been subjected to mosquito bite by the mosquito vector there in USA, and this cycle have been transmitted also when this virus had replicated in this mosquito by biological transmission. And after biting the birds infected with the West Nile virus, the mosquito also bite the horse. Okay, so this outbreak happened in areas where there was large farm horses. So an incidental infection happened to the horses in this area, and the humans have been infected, mostly farmers and those who contacted or were nearby those farms. So the mosquito has transmitted these infections to the horses and to the people living in this area. Another famous disease, which is the Rift Valley fever, which belongs to the Bunyaviridae. And you have to know that the Rift Valley is an area present in Kenya. So this disease is endemic in Kenya. Rift Valley is a zoonotic disease, so it is primarily a disease of animals, with humans being an accidental host. So by accident, this disease can be transmitted to humans. And this happens in the course of epizootics. Epizootics means epidemic in the animals. So whenever there is a farm where there is many animals and those animals, all of them have been infected with the Rift Valley, at that time it can be transmitted accidentally to the humans. Usually it affects sheep and cattle. So it comes in the farms where they raise sheep and cattle for meat. And they maintain themselves in nature by the help of the arthropod Culex mosquito and non-human primates. Here you must know that the Rift Valley fever have two modes of transmission, or three of course modes of transmission. First, as we said, because it is an arboviral infection, so it must be transmitted through an arthropod bite, so it can be transmitted by the Culex mosquito bite. Okay, this is number one. Number two, they found that direct contact with the infected animals can transmit the infection. Also, the respiratory tract, droplet infection, and direct respiratory contact between, for example, the farmer and the sheep he cares about, he can get the infection. That's why they found that humans can be infected, the humans that care about those diseased cattle and sheep can get the infection. So you must take care, because Rift Valley has no only arthropod borne, but it can be transmitted through direct contact or respiratory tract. The Rift Valley disease in humans, we don't care about the animals because the animals have their own doctors. So we care about humans who had contact with those diseased animal and sheep. So if the doctor asks some persons that work in the countryside, in farms, do you have diseased cattle and sheep? And he says, yes, you must take in consideration that it could be a Rift Valley fever. So this Rift Valley fever is of acute onset of fever, high temperature, prostration, sweating, pain in the extremities and joints, and gastrointestinal disease, cramps with diarrhea and vomiting. If the cases are severe and complicated, the person can experience hemorrhage due to disease in the liver or dysfunctioning liver, jaundice also due to liver disease, encephalitis because the virus can reach the brain, and retinitis and can be subjected to sudden diminution of vision or maybe blindness. Prevention of Rift Valley fever depends mainly on vaccination of domestic animals, can be by killed viral vaccine or can be also by attenuated live viral vaccine. And this vaccination of those humans preventing the disease in the animals can prevent transmission to both humans and animals. Zika virus is a virus, arbovirus, that has been isolated in rhesus monkeys in 1947. But there is a global threat in the last decade, so it was of no interest till it spreaded in the last decades. Why it got that famousness and this interest or the importance globally? Because it has been associated with maternal fetal transmission. So when the mother is infected with the Zika virus, this virus can be transmitted to the newborn or the fetus inside the uterus and can cause microcephaly. This means small brain. So the brain will arrest from development with neurological abnormalities. So it is a serious condition in case the mother got the infection. It can be transmitted by mosquito bite. Also, as we said, pregnant to fetus. Sexual transmission is possible, and in case of blood transfusion also it is possible. Otherwise, the infection in a normal person who is not a mother, who is not pregnant, has no big deal because there is no symptoms, or the symptoms can be mild symptoms like dengue, and the incubation period is 3 to 12 days. Thank you, and please continue the rest of the second half of the lecture by opening the presentation of the roboviruses.